Hello, welcome to the Shepherd Staff 2018 Membership 102 webinar. Today we're going to focus on subgroups and reports. Hi, my name is Rod Kiles and I am the customer onboarding specialist for Concordia Technology Solutions. And actually right now I'm the interim manager for Concordia Technology Solutions support. You can reach me one of two ways. You can reach me by email at rod.kiles@cph.org, and you can also reach me by phone at 314-268-1315. I kindly ask that you mute your phones and or microphones and post any questions you may have in the question window. So we're going to start off with today's webinar by going through the class structure. So we'll do that by going through our class agenda. And the first part of our agenda is going to be the class overview. So we'll talk about the different topics that we're going to discuss during this webinar. So after we get through the overview, then we are going to go ahead and jump into our discussion. Our discussion is going to be broken into two parts separated by a short 5-minute intermission. So we'll talk somewhere for about an hour, 50, 55, 60 minutes, depending on how the material separates and breaks down. Then we'll have a short 5-minute intermission. During that 5-minute period, you can do whatever you'd like. You may want to stop and take a short break, grab something to drink, try something out in Shepherd Staff, whatever you'd like to do during that 5 minutes, that is your time period. So after our intermission, we'll resume, we'll finish covering the second half of the material. Then from there, we'll have a short 5-question quiz, no pressure during the quiz. Just answer the questions and it'll kind of be a wrap up of some of the material that we covered. And it may also foster questions that we can answer during our question and answer session. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to post those questions and I'll go ahead and answer them. Joining us today is going to be James Bowman as well, and he'll be answering questions along the way. So let's go ahead and go through our class overview. So we're going to start out with talking about subgroups. So we'll describe what subgroups are. We'll go through the different types of subgroups. We'll start out with dynamic, show you how to use dynamic subgroups. We'll also talk about static, and we'll also talk about combined subgroups as well. So we'll go through those 3 different types of subgroups, and there's only 3, so we're going to make sure to cover all 3 of them. After that, we'll kind of switch gears and we'll go into reports, and we're going to talk about the subgroups reports. There's 2 of them that we're going to talk about today, subgroups and subgroups by person. From there, most likely that'll be the time point that we have our short 5-minute intermission, but when we resume, we'll go through report conventions. And we'll talk about the things that are going to be similar amongst all reports, especially the major reports. And to show that demonstration, what we'll do is we'll use the church directory. So the church directory is a great report. It has basically all of the little parts that you'll see throughout the rest of the software when it comes to reporting. So church directory will also show the anniversaries report, and of course we'll show mailing labels. And those are probably what you would consider the big 3 reports that you see inside of the membership module. So after we get done with mailing labels, we'll then have our short 5-question quiz. We'll have our question and answer session. Then I guess at that point we'll head to lunch. So I'm excited, as you can tell. I hope you're excited as well. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and switch screens, and I'm going to switch over to Shepherd Staff. There we go. And I'm also going to turn off the webcam so that we can focus on Shepherd Staff as a whole instead of focusing on my head movements there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the webcam, and everybody should be able to see Shepherd Staff at this point in time. So let me double check that the audience is viewing Shepherd Staff, and that looks good. No toolbar. So everybody who logs into Shepherd Staff is going to have their own username and password. I'm going to log in as the system administrator, and this is going to give me full rights to the program. So every church should have a system administrator, and whoever is that system administrator, they'll kind of be like the top level in the abilities that you'll have inside the program. And you can set up multiple different logins, and those users may have different rights. So you could have logins for pastors, for administrators, for ministry leaders, for financial secretaries, for treasurers, and each can have different rights. The login does track the things that you do within the program. So having those logins set up give you a chance to follow up on people, but also prevent people from accidentally seeing information that they should not. So below that, there's going to be your CTS account is not registered. I intentionally didn't register this database so that we could, at least briefly talk about registering your database in these first few sessions. And registering gives you a few different benefits inside of the software. And we'll be talking about those more and more as we go along this next 30 days worth of trainings. So, one of the big benefits is the ability to do web tools. Another one is the ability to upload your database to our on-site backup now. So that's another option. I didn't mention that one yesterday. The third one is receive automatic updates. So if your contract is active, you'll be able to download those. And a fourth one that I did mention yesterday is the videos. So when we record these videos, the old recorded videos are uploaded into the software. So you can watch those as well. So you can register, and we'll show registration in another video. Version 8.6 is the current version. So that's the one you should be on right now. And you can check for software updates when you log in. So I'm going to go ahead and log into Shepherd Staff. When you log in, it's going to say your version down here at the bottom. So Shepherd Staff version 8.6. I'm on Feature Pack 8.6, and it was released on January 1, third time's the charm, January 15th, 2018. So across the top of the window is going to be your main menu bar: membership, attendance, contributions, finance, scheduler, utilities. Move that over. Help and exit. So we're going to go into the membership module, and inside the membership module is going to be different utilities and different functions to allow us to manage our church membership. So when the window comes up, usually the I want to will appear. I did disable that the last time on our webinar yesterday. If you want the I want to appear, it is a shortcut to commonly access tasks inside of your membership module or inside whichever module you're in. You can go up to desktop here in our main menu bar or in our menu bar, and then you can say show the I want to on startup, and then that would launch the I want to. And you can also disable it as well by unchecking the checkbox down at the bottom. Behind that's going to be the church dashboard, which is a snapshot of church statistics for the module that you're in. I'm going to close that. There's also the to-do list, and we actually talk about the to-do list in one of our later trainings. So it's a neat feature. It does allow you to create a task list and follow up with the people that you assign the task to. So let me close that. And then on the left-hand side, I'm going to leave the people tree open. We may need that during today's training, during today's webinar. So in the household tree allows you to find people quickly and click on their name and then find additional information about that person. So the household tree is like a tree view of your church membership, and then you can filter the records that you're seeing by using the drop list here at the top. So if I just wanted to see only members, then I could switch over to only members. Okay, so at the top of your window is going to be your menu bar, and below that is going to be your toolbar. And I prefer to use the little toolbar icons, but the menu bar is just fine. I use that at times as well. So to access subgroups, one of our two primary focuses for today, you'll either click the word subgroups to open up the subgroups window, or you'll click the subgroups icon, and that is the little S icon here at the top. So when you click on that icon, and it's like the big S is supposed to be your group, your church membership as a whole, including non-members and visitors, everybody that's in the database, and then the two little blocks below it are supposed to represent your subgroups. So that's kind of like a visual representation of what you'll see for subgroups. So here goes our subgroups window. It's a grid like a lot of the other grids that you're going to see within the program. And it's going to allow you to filter your people based on your subgroups. So now that we've shown how to open up the subgroups window here, let's switch back to our PowerPoint. And I have several slides that kind of go through and discuss like setting up and preparing for using subgroups and how to prepare subgroups. So I'm going to go back and switch back to our PowerPoint slide. So subgroups. And I kind of decided when I was setting up this PowerPoint to kind of do a who, what, when, where, why, and how kind of type thing there. So when you're thinking about preparing your subgroups, one of the big things you want to think about is who should be in this subgroup. So in your head, you're already kind of deciding, well, I think I need a subgroup, but the end results of that subgroup should be kind of in the forefront of your mind. And a question came in from Lori Lynn, and I hope I'm pronouncing people's names correctly. I'm really bad with names, but a question just came in from Lori Lynn that is relevant. This PowerPoint presentation is requested, and Lori Lynn says, how do I get copies of the PowerPoint? So at the end of these webinars, if I haven't made any mistakes, I go through and I just take it and I upload it to a page on YouTube, and then that is embedded in a page that Buffy is going to send every one of the attendees. So she includes the videos and the PowerPoint presentations at the end of it. So you'll be receiving an email, as will everybody who attends these webinars with all this information. Oh, you're welcome, Lori Lynn. Okay, so preparation. Who should be in the subgroup? So we're kind of starting out. Hey, this is who we're looking for. So let me click right there. There we go. So who do you expect to be part of this subgroup when we get all the way to the end? Are we looking for just active members? Is this a list of visitors who recently attended? Could it be based on, hey, we want people who recently contributed, people who recently did not attend, so they were attending, but they're not attending right now. So all those things are going to be, things we're thinking about. Who are we looking for? Are these people part of VBS? Are these church elders? We just want to kind of get a picture in our head who we are considering. After that, the next thing really is what do these people have in common? And this what comes down to being able to make a connection with other people within the database, and also making a decision on what type of subgroups we're going to create. And we're going to talk about the types of subgroups in a minute. Okay, so from there, do these people live in a certain city or county? Are they all male or female? Are they young or old? Do they all participate in the same activity? Have they attended a certain attendance event or not attended that event? So, what do they have in common? And there is a question that came in from Catherine, and she says, you talked about being able to add items to the drop list on the main member tree Dropbox. Can you add categories there as well? And unfortunately, at this time, you can't add categories. Sorry about that, Catherine. Okay, so what do these people have in common? And I guess one more option, have they contributed a certain amount of money or pledged a certain amount? And one thing you may notice that's different about this slide than the other slide, there's a lot of variations of where the information is coming from. So when I'm looking at this, some of this information is in the membership module. Some of this is in the activity skills and training grid. Some of this information is in the attendance module, and some of this information is in the contributions module. So one thing that you'll need to know about subgroups is the fact that when it comes to subgroups, you can create subgroups in membership, attendance, and the contributions module, but you cannot create subgroups in the finance module. The finance module is basically considered separate from the first three for the most part. Now, the information is easily shared between membership, attendance, and contributions. There is a loose connection. I call it a loose connection because basically it's a one-way connection when you hand information off from contribution to finance when you're posting a batch. So it's a loose connection there, but it is a connection. So, but the takeaway from that is the fact that you can create subgroups for membership information, attendance information, and contributions information. Okay. Preparation. When does the subgroup occur? So time is a factor when we're thinking about subgroups. Your subgroup may search for information in a certain month, a prior fiscal year, or during a 2-year time span. So we're thinking about our subgroups, and every single subgroup isn't as of this exact moment in time. You may be saying, hey, I want to find people who attended over the last 6 months, or attended over the last year but did not attend this year. So there's different types of time frames that you'll be wanting to consider. Preparation. Where is the information that only these people share? And this really does lend toward what we're going to be talking about here in a couple of moments about dynamic subgroups, because when you're considering this information, you're going to say, hey, do they have something in common so we can create this dynamic subgroup? So does household, person records, attendance, or contribution records contain information that only these people share? So can we find a connection so that we can create a dynamic subgroup? And sometimes you'll say yes, sometimes you'll say no. It just depends on what you're looking for. Preparation. Why is this subgroup being created? And knowing this information is beneficial to the customer, but it also helps the support team as well. So if we find out why it's being created, it might help us better understand how to help you create the subgroup. But also it can help us possibly find a separate alternative that's even better. So what is its purpose? Is this to find a list of ushers? Is it to print out mailing labels? Is it to find non-attenders? There's quite a few possibilities, and depending on the situation, we might just be able to use a report, or we might need to create a combined subgroup. So preparation. How will you create the subgroup? So when it comes to subgroups, those of you that have been using the software for a time period know that you can create subgroups throughout different parts of the software. But one big thing that I like to mention first is the fact that there's a possibility that the subgroup does already exist. So if it does exist, you don't want to create a second subgroup or a third subgroup because you'll clutter your subgroup window. And we'll talk about subgroup maintenance here later on during today's webinar. But if it already exists, you don't have to create another one. You'll just end up with a backlog of a lot of subgroups. So does one already exist? If not, if so, can an existing subgroup be modified? And if that's yes, go ahead and do it. The other thing is you can create subgroups with some of the reports inside of the software. So like the absentee report will create you a static subgroup. So does the contributor non-participation. So there's several reports out there that will allow you to just create subgroups based on the report and the reporting information. So dynamic. So there's 3 types of subgroups, and the first of those 3 is dynamic. Dynamic contains search criteria defining whom to include in the group. So it's not adding a list of names. It is of criteria. So they do not contain a list of names, but of criteria to match. So you're not going to go through and select names one by one. You're going to enter in a criteria line. And that criteria line is basically a filter that's going to help you find the people that you are looking for. And when working with these criteria lines, you may need several search criteria on different fields to isolate the people that you need. So you're going through and you're creating a subgroup, and your subgroup may be a list of, hey, I want a list of members who've contributed in the last year, who's over the age of 18, who've over the age of 18 contributed, attended, and who's at least participated in one of the activities. So you're trying to find active members, and you're trying to decide that by adding in all of these criteria lines. And if you're attending, you're contributing, and you're participating in church activities, then you're really participating in what's going on at the church. So it may take several lines, but it also may just take one line. Really, it goes back to those first initial slides where, hey, what are we looking to do with this subgroup? Okay, so dynamic, and to note, I've kind of held with the number of 240, and there's even more fields than that now, but there's over 240 fields in the membership, attendance, and contributions module to search for. You just kind of have to narrow it down to the fields that you want. So dynamic, a few other little facts about dynamic subgroups. Each time the subgroup is used, the members of the group reflect the current information in the database, hence the name dynamic. So they change as you add information into the program. And my other line came up, if a subgroup is created for those in the 3rd grade Sunday school class, different people will match that criteria today, next year, and 5 years from now, as long as your data is up to date. So with this subgroup being a dynamic subgroup, then it's automatically going to update. You don't have to make any changes to the subgroup. You just have to change your records within the program for the subgroup to be updated. So, and that's one reason why people really like the dynamic subgroups, because they're always up to date. The only thing you have to do is make sure to set the criteria correctly. The second type of subgroup is static, and I like to think of static as being the opposite of dynamic. So dynamic change as you make changes within the program. The static subgroups do not change as you make changes in the program. The static subgroups are going to contain a list of names, and you as administrators and users of the software are going to go through and simply add the names to these static subgroups. You're going to want to use a static subgroup when you need a list of just a few people and you know the names of those people. So if you don't know the names of those people, then you're really going to need to use a dynamic subgroup, because you're going to find them based on criteria. But if you know the names, then you can just create a static subgroup. Excuse me. You'll also want to use a static subgroup when you need a list of names as of a fixed point in time for historical reference. And a good example of that is last year's board members. So, that's a point in time. They were the board members for 2015, or they were the board members for 2017. So it's a point in time. The static subgroup won't change unless you go and make changes to that static subgroup. And you'll also use a static subgroup when you need a list of people who have nothing in common. So there's literally nothing in common within the database, so you have to go through and either give them something in common in the database and then use a dynamic subgroup, but it may just be easier to just go through, select their names, and create a static subgroup with those individuals' names. So a good example of that is VBS. So you'll have people in VBS, but you may not have VBS represented in any of your fields. You can just open up a static subgroup, select the few parents, select the kids, save it, and then that's your VBS subgroup. And that's the example we're going to use here in just a few minutes. Okay, so the third type of subgroup, and I would consider this the most complex of the 3 subgroups, is the combined subgroups. And combined subgroups let you combine up to 5 different static and or dynamic subgroups and treat them as one. So it's kind of like adding and subtracting people to your list, but doing it based on the subgroup that they belong to. So when we're working with combined subgroups, you may want a list of members and all of the people who are part of VBS. and then you can combine those two together and send out a mailing. So I'm inviting all of those people on the VBS list plus all of your members to join VBS at that point. So combined subgroups are great for that benefit because there may not be anything in common, or all the people who are on the VBS list are not members, so they don't fall in our members subgroup, but they do fall in this other static subgroup that we created. Okay, so the other line is the contents of all the subgroups involved are added or subtracted from one another to produce the list of names. So you're basically adding or subtracting those names. Okay, how do I choose? Great question. So how do I choose which type of subgroup to use? How do I determine whether to create a dynamic, a static, or a combined subgroup? So for dynamic subgroups, you're going to use a dynamic subgroup when the people have something in common, or you can give them something in common by using one of our custom fields on the other tab of the household or person records. And it could even be through an activity, skill, or training. If it's dynamic, another little neat thing, you may want to use a dynamic subgroup when you do not know all of the names for which you are looking. And so say a pastor joins a new church and is looking for a certain group of people. You can use a dynamic subgroup to find that list of people. And sooner or later, pastor will know all of those people, but doesn't know initially. So dynamic subgroups work great in those situations. And then another one is you have a specific criteria for these people to match, and the list is not fixed in time or will not change over time. So we know dynamic subgroups will change and select the data no matter what. So if it's not changing, we're going to use a dynamic subgroup. So, I'm sorry, it is changing. We are going to use a dynamic subgroup. Okay, so when to use a static subgroup? We want to use a static subgroup when your list contains less than 20 to 50 people, depending on the size of your church. If it's a larger group, you should most likely be using a dynamic or a combined subgroup. So, kind of in our heads, we have to know that we've got to go through and select all of these names. And that's the reason why I, kind of pinned it at 50 people. If you got to go through and click 50 times to select these names, or go back and read through 50 lines to make sure the correct number of people are on there, you start moving to 75, you start moving to 100, you're probably at the point where you really should be considering going a different course and creating some dynamic subgroups. That would be our advice. Is considered a best practice to use dynamic subgroups for those larger groups. But of course, that's strictly going to be up to you and how to handle that. Okay, use a dynamic subgroup when you already know all the names for which you are looking, and there is no existing relationship between the individuals in the subgroup. So in a situation like this, if you know that there's a connection, you'll just create a dynamic subgroup. If you don't know if there's a connection, then you'll create a static subgroup. Or you might want to give us a call and we can see if we can help you out and maybe save you a little bit of time there. Okay, and then the last bullet on the static slide is the list is fixed and changes very little over time. So if it doesn't change a lot, feel free and feel comfortable that you're making the right decision to use a static subgroup. Okay, combined. Use a combined subgroup when you need information about the people in list A, but not the people in list B. So in most cases, they've added reports for this scenario. So it's a subtraction scenario. Back in the olden days, I guess you could say, we created a lot of subgroups for finding people who were not participating in certain things. So for people who are not attending, for people who are not contributing, for people who are not participating. Now we have the absentee report, which is used for people who are not attending. We have the contributor non-participation report for people who are not contributing, and we have the inactivity report for people who are not participating. So in most cases, you're just going to use one of those reports, but a combined subgroup is a way of getting the exact same report, exact same information. Okay, so let's see. The next bullet, you need information about people in either list A or list B, and that goes back to my example of people who are members, but also the people who are part of VBS who may not be members. So addition is going to add those two together. And then number 3, you have a group where most people have something in common, but a few of those people do not. So you can use subtraction and or addition, remembering that you can have up to five subgroups there. So there's a possibility you may need to add a few people or subtract a few people. So let's make some subgroups. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Shepherd staff, and I want to pause just 1 second. And I have a few subgroups that I've listed, but this is a subgroups training, and there may be some subgroups that you would like to see me create. So the subgroups that I usually create during this presentation is going to be finding members between a certain age, finding all your members who are not removed, creating a subgroup for people who creating a subgroup for those who, third time's a charm, creating a subgroup that excludes those who have an unknown address. And I also do a static subgroup for VBS, and then I'll combine those subgroups together. But if there's a subgroup that you would like to see, like you have a situation that arose at one point in time and you weren't able to get the subgroup worked out, feel free to post that in the question box. And if you post that in the question box, I'll create that subgroup for you. If there aren't any in the question box, of course, I can go through and create these. These are good examples of how to use subgroups and how to make subgroups, and it gives us an opportunity to go through and show all the different options and show you how to create subgroups. So no worries if there aren't any possible examples there. So excuse me, just 1 second. Okay, so oh, hello, Catherine. Okay, so what about regular attending visitors? Yes, we will do that one. That's perfect. Okay, so I'll make the first couple of subgroups and then we'll do regular attending visitors. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so to create our subgroups, we're going to go into our subgroup window here. And once we're in the subgroup window, you'll notice there'll be tabs across the top: subgroups, people, import/export, and security. And when we're creating a subgroup, we're actually going to be on the subgroups tab. And then down at the bottom of the window, there's going to be category, and it's going to say all. And the categories give you the ability to filter your subgroup. So you may have tons of subgroups. We have 52 here inside of our sample database, and you may have hundreds. So with 52 of them, it's not too bad, but you start getting more, you may just want to filter by one of the categories. And we're going to show categories as well. Across the bottom of the window are going to be our action buttons. And basically when I say action buttons, I'm talking about applying an action to the grid or applying an action to the subgroup. So close, add, edit, delete. There's create a static subgroup from the selected subgroup. So if you have a dynamic subgroup, you can convert that to a list of names by turning it into a static subgroup. You can copy a subgroup to save you a little bit of time. Of course, you could sort your grid. There is the count button, which lets you know the number of people inside of your subgroup. There's also labels, preview, export to Excel, and the number of subgroups in our list. So here inside of the grid, to create our first subgroup, members between the age of, and we're going to select an age. So what we're going to do is we're going to click add down here at the bottom. And then that's going to bring up our create a new subgroup window. So we'll have the choice of dynamic, static, or combined, and we're going to start with dynamic. So we're going to create a subgroup based on criteria. The subgroup is always up to date with the latest people who match this criteria. So if I click on dynamic, it'll just automatically select dynamic for me. And also if I click on OK, it'll do the same thing. So dynamic, there we go. And it's going to bring up the add a new dynamic subgroup. And our first one is members between the age of, and let's say 18 and 32. So we'll say 18 to 32. Then below that's going to be category. Category will allow us to create a category to group our subgroups together. So if there's no categories in the drop list, then we can click the little pencil here on the left-hand side, and that'll bring up this window. This window is relatively new. I believe it showed up in the last release. And basically, this is going to be the direction the programmer is going for creating categories. So name to add, we're going to call these membership subgroups. And then if we click the add button, it'll add it into our drop list. So select an item to delete. These are going to be our subgroups. So, and I'm going to create one additional one. I'm going to say Vacation Bible School. Then click add. And then this is actually the items in our drop list. So when I'm done, I'll click done. And those items are actually here in our drop list. Then from there, once I select my item, I can type in a description. So if I need some additional notes, and those notes could be for myself or they could be for my associates or future associates as well. So, I could just type in additional notes, and it could, this is a list of all members and 32. So after that, what I'll do is I'll go to add down here at the bottom. And when I go through the add process, what I'll need to do is select one of my criteria fields here. I'm sorry, one of my category fields here. And basically, since we have so many different items, the programmer has broken them down into categories. So you'll just select the appropriate categories. We're going to start out with, and I believe it's under church. So for years I was using this software, and there weren't any categories, and there's categories now, so I have to kind of get used to it. But underneath church is going to be the ones that are related to the church tab of your person record. So member yes, no, member question mark. So you'll select the category, then you'll select the field, then you'll say equal to, or you'll select an operator. So it could be equal to, it could be greater than, it could be less than, could be between, could be not equal to, could be blank. So there's several different operators. With member, it's basically you are a member or you're not a member. So member equal to yes, then we'll say continue, because we're looking for members between the age of 18 and 32. So then at that point, we'll click add, and we'll add in a second line. And since we're doing age, we're going to do personal. Age as of today. So personal age as of today. And then we're going to say between. And I believe that between is inclusive. So if we say between 18 and 32, that should include the people who are of the age 18 and who are of the age 32. And we'll double check our results here in just a moment. So then at that point, we'll click continue. And then those will be our two criteria lines. If we need to edit a line, we can click on that line and click on edit. Then that will allow us to go back in and make changes. So we'll click continue. And if we need to delete a line, then we'll just click on the row and we will click delete. And that will allow us to delete an extra line that we don't need. So as we make changes, there'll be a little floppy disk here on the left-hand side. and on the right-hand side of your screen, but on the left-hand side of the Save button. So then we can save it, and then that will save our subgroup here into the window. So usually the very first thing I do is I go down to the subgroup, then I click on Count. And depending on the results, I'll say to myself, well, that looks pretty good, or I'll be like, oh, Rod, you messed up that subgroup. So it's going to be one or the other. And, you know, if I get 0 and I entered it on my criteria, I know I didn't do it right. So I know I need to double back and tweak the subgroup. But in my head, there should be a number that makes sense. So in looking at our data, I know we only have so many people. 38 people inside of this subgroup sounds right. It'll also let us know the number of households as well. So, you know, there's 38 people, but they live in 28 different households. So then at that point, I'll click OK. And now that my subgroup, it seems like it's correct, you know, I've made my first verification, my first double check by clicking on Count. I'm kind of at a Y in the road or a fork in the road of some sort. I can either go to people here at the top, and then this will show me all the people that meet that criteria. And I can just basically go down through the list. And on the right-hand side, there's going to be kind of like the fast facts information. So there's, you know, a snapshot of people, you know, birthdays, baptisms, just different additional personal information. And I can actually view the fast facts window, which has a little bit more information. But if, you know, if the person has an email address and I have email set up on this computer, I guess there's a third one as well, but I also have it enabled inside of Shepherd Staff. I can send them an email. And I can also take this list and export it to Excel if need be. So like, this is a list of names. I click on this little spreadsheet here, and then that will take all of those names and send them out to Microsoft Excel. So let me grab this from my other computer monitor and pull it over here. And then this would be a list of all of those names. And I could then send that list to somebody if I wanted to, or I could, you know, copy and paste this information into another program if I'd like. So let me go ahead and close the spreadsheet here. Don't save. Okay, so that's a quick list, a quick way to kind of just review through the names. So let me go ahead and go back to subgroups. If I've reviewed the names and they look pretty good, I may want a report of these individuals. To get a report, I could go to preview, and then that will preview on my screen and show me the individuals, but it'll also show me additional information as well. So there'll be nickname information. It'll show us our sequence. And sequence, one is head of household, 2 is spouse, 3 is going to be child, 4 is other, and 5 is deceased. So 1 is head of household, 2 is spouse, 3 is other, 4 is, redo that one more time. 1 is head of household, 2 is spouse, 3 is child, 4 is other, and 5 is deceased. Head of household, spouse, child, other, deceased, 1 through 5. And basically it's like a designation they use in the software to allow them to save a little space, but also the software uses it to help you pull records and stuff. So that's the sequence. Sex, male, female, age. If you're over the age of 21, it will not show your age. And it did include the people who are 18, so it is inclusive. And then all of these people should be members. So we have down here at the bottom, you'll notice it says members, 13, female, 25. So members, there's 13 males and 25 females. We excluded non-members, so these totals will match our member counts. And it also shows the sequence down here at the bottom. Let me zoom in just a little bit here. And then you should be able to see that a little bit better on your screen. Okay, so from there, if we want to print this report, we'll just use the print button down here at the bottom, and then that will send it over to your local printer. We can also export this to a PDF if we wanted to. The list of formats is going to be tied to your computer. So some people will have a longer list than other people, but every computer should have an Adobe Acrobat PDF type reader on the computer. So you could send it out to PDF if you wanted to. So let me cancel that and close the preview. So we've looked at this, it looks pretty good. One of the great benefits of subgroups is that you can use that subgroup throughout the software. So once I've created this list, if I wanted to do mailing labels, I could go to mailing labels down here. I could view just these individuals in the people group, in the people grid by going down to the find option and selecting just this subgroup. I can print reports, like if I wanted a church directory just of these people, I could select this subgroup in a church directory. And we're going to talk more about the church directory here in a moment, but subgroups are kind of universal in that way that they can be used throughout the software to help narrow your results down just to the people that you're looking for. Okay, you may notice that there's an export to spreadsheet button here. And I guess let me mention two things there. The fact that it says export to spreadsheet instead of export to Excel is because it's basically sending this data to your spreadsheet program. So there's a lot of churches that don't use Excel. So, for you to, kind of get into the Microsoft world, you do have to purchase their products. There are free ones out there, and you can set up Shepherd Staff to use that freeware word processing program that has a spreadsheet program in there. So I know Open Office has one, and there's several other ones out there. So if you're using one of the free products, let us know. And if you'd like, or if you're using one and you want us to help you set up that program as your spreadsheet program, let us know, and we can help you do that after the webinar. Okay, so preview labels. So we've created our first subgroup here, and let's go ahead, and I want to create a couple other subgroups as well, including the regular attender subgroup. So I'm going to go to add here, and the next dynamic subgroup that I'm going to create is finding people who are members, but they're not removed. So members not removed. Now, inside of Shepherd Staff, you can be a member and you can also be a removed member. And when you're a member, in most cases, being in a church office, you're not wanting to include those people on your reports. A lot of the reports have filters that are built in to exclude removed people, but all of the reports do not. And if you run into a report that does not automatically exclude removed people, you could use this subgroup to exclude those removed people. So we're going to say members not removed, and we're going to select, this is going to be a membership subgroup. We're going to say add, and we're going to say church. So we're going to say these members equal to yes, and continue. And then we're going to add another line, and the next one is going to be tied to the removed by field. So we can say removed by or removed by date or date removed. So we're going to say removed by, and then we're going to say is blank, meaning that the field is completely blank. There's nothing in that field. So you could say is blank. You could also say not equal to if you're trying to find just a certain group of removed people, but we're going to say is blank, saying we want to exclude all removed people. Then click continue. So we have our two criteria lines, member equal to yes and removed by is equal to blank. Then we'll say save. And then I always go through and I count just to kind of see how close it is to what my expectation is. And if it looks good, I'll click OK, and then I can go to people or I can go to preview to find those names and view that information. Excuse me. Okay, so that would be finding a list of all your members who are not removed. Let's create let's do newsletters with no unknown addresses. So lots of times when you're printing out mailing labels, you want to print a mailing label for everybody who wants a newsletter, but you don't want to waste labels on people who don't have an address. And to do that, we'll add in a dynamic subgroup. So we'll say dynamic, we'll click OK, and then this is going to be all newsletters. And then in our description, we're going to say all people who requested a newsletter, excluding those without an address. Okay, so then from there, we'll say add, and we're going to go to household, since newsletter is a household field. So receives newsletter, and there's two options there. There's yes or no to receiving a newsletter, but there's also newsletter method, which could be both print or it could be electronic. So we're just going to say receives newsletter is yes, and then continue. And then we're also going to add in a line to exclude those people who don't have an address. So we're going to go to contact, and then underneath contact, we're going to say primary address line. Then we're going to say not equal to. Then we're going to say unknown. So yesterday I was talking about, hey, if you have an unknown address, you want to use the unknown address button, so we end up entering in consistent unknown information. So we're going to say unknown, and if you have more than one unknown option, I don't have that set up here, but you could go down and you could select those unknown addresses as well. So you may have more than one if you've had the software for a while, but entering it in consistently is really what you want to do. So I'm going to go to continue. Oh, let me make sure I check that checkbox there. There we go. Then continue. So receives newsletter equal to yes, and primary address line 1 not equal to unknown. So then at that point we will click save, and then if we go to labels down here at the bottom, it's going to jump us over to our label window. It'll automatically load that subgroup. Then if we click preview, and I'll come back and go through the different options later on, but we'll have everybody who has an address, but it's excluding those people who are unknown. So we shouldn't lose any labels or waste any money at that point in time. Okay, so I'm going to close the labels, and we'll venture into labels here a little bit more in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that regular attending visitors. So to create a subgroup for regular attending visitors, there's two ways of doing that. One is by creating a subgroup, and I'm going to lay the second one out there right now because it could save you some time. But I'm going to move the subgroups window over here, go to reports, go to reports, and underneath reports, there's a visitor follow-up report. In the visitor follow-up report, you'll notice that there's options on this report that say who you can select as being visitors, but also state when they attended during the time period. So that's one way of doing it, is the visitor follow-up report. To create a subgroup, let me go back to subgroups. You would go to add, and we would add a dynamic subgroup. So dynamic, and then let's see, regular attending visitors, category. I'm going to create a new one, and we're going to call this one visitors. Add, done, and we're going to select visitors here. Okay, and under description, you can say visitors who attended, and then you can have some type of criteria. So like we're going to say add, for someone to be a visitor, usually you're meeting one of two criteria or both of those criteria. So if the person's a visitor, the first thing is for church, they're going to be non-members. So church member equal to no. So they're not a member of the church. Then two, their participation is going to be, so church participation is probably going to be visitor, but it could be guest or friend or spouse of a member. So there are some different criteria that make them a visitor as well. But we're just going to say that it's visitors. So equal to visitor, then continue. And then for them to be a regular visitor, they would have had to have attended so many times in a time period. So we'll add another criteria line. So we could say that underneath attendance, they have type 1, 3, and 5. And these aren't quite in order. So let me mention what type 1 is, what times attended type 1, times attended type 2, times attended type 3, 4, and 5. So type 1 is worship, type 2 is communion, type 3 is Sunday school, then type 4 and 5 are other. And these types can be changed and modified, and you'll be talking about that when you attend the attendance training. But for our purposes, let's just say type 1 is worship, 2 is communion, 3 is Sunday school, 4 is other 1, and 5 is other 2. So we can say attended type 1 times attended type 1 times attended type 1. There we go. Okay. So you could say that they attended type 1 5 times, then continue, and then you can add in another line that they attended type 1 this year. So last date attended type 1, and you could set a time frame. So you could say last date is greater than or less than or between a certain time period. So you could say first of the month, last of the month, greater than or less than the last 6 months, between, and I believe today would go there, and 3 months ago. So just depending on what type of time frames you wanted to create. So then continue, and you would save, and I'm pretty sure that I don't have any visitors who attended inside my database, but I'm going to click count as well. And I have no regular attending visitors, but let me go back to that subgroup just for a second and edit that subgroup. If I take off the 2 lines for attendance, and I save that subgroup and go to count, I do have 50 visitors inside the database that meet that criteria. So, you know, it's a matter of recording attendance. Let me add another little note to recording attendance that may have kind of popped in people's minds. You know, like how would you know whether or not they attended? So when it comes to visitors, if you want to record attendance for those visitors, you do have to enter them into the system, and you do have to record their attendance. And lots of times there's a debate there. Hey, when should we, you know, enter those people into the system? Should they have to attend 3 times? Do we do it the first time they attend? Those are all tough questions that are answered there inside the church for how you want to manage your how you want to manage your database. But entering that information in is the only way that you can truly follow up on those people. So, and that's something to kind of get together and discuss. But it's going to be the last date attended field that you need to take a look at when you're finding those people. And you may want to use the visitor follow-up report, and it might just save you some time, because with the visitor follow-up report, it allows you to say who attended worship 3 times during this time period, and it's all done on one line. So it's a little easier to use than actually creating a subgroup. But that's why we added these in, so that you could quickly find those people. So, okay, so hopefully that helped to answer your question there, Catherine. So we've created some dynamic subgroups and showed you how to use the controls there. You're welcome. You're welcome, Catherine. Okay, so next is static. So we've created a dynamic subgroup, which is based on criteria, but there's going to be times you're going to want to create static subgroups. You're just going to want to select the names of those individuals. So let's go ahead and close this reports window. Let's go to add, and we're going to go to static. And we're going to create that VBS subgroup we were talking about earlier. So VBS, there we go. And so it doesn't meet one of our criterias here. Oh, it does, Vacation Bible School. There we go. And then at that point, we could select the people who are going to participate in VBS. So we can go through and we can select their names. It does allow you to click what I like to call willy-nilly. So however, you clicked, it doesn't have to be, sequential or anything. You go through and select the names that you want. And I'm just going to select about 15 names here. Kelly, and select the Callaway. So there's 15. Then from there, I can click on the add button, and then that will move them over from our not in subgroup list over to our in subgroup list. And then these would be the people who are inside the subgroup. They would also be the people who we would contact if we were doing mailing labels or we were creating a phone call list or something like that. So these are going to be the people who are part of that group. You can add them by moving them over by clicking the add button. If you move somebody over and you don't want them in that list, you can click on their name and click on remove, and then that would take them off the list. I was showing single click and add, but you can double click as well, and then that will move the names over. So, and you can double click to take the name off as well. So. And I would be careful of the add all or remove all options, and only use those when really necessary. Okay, so there are these little squares down here at the bottom, and they allow you to select all or unselect all, and then apply that option to add or remove at that point in time. Now there are filters down at the bottom, and those filters allow you to filter your data or filter your records. So we're looking at everyone, and this might not be an every one type of situation. This might be a situation where, hey, we just want to look at current members. We want to exclude, and you see how I went from, I think it was 236 down to 186. Let's see, everyone, 235. And then when you go down to current members, these are going to be all members who are not removed. So then those are your current members. So at that point, you can just select from your current members. So it kind of gives you a chance to kind of filter your records and see less data, and allow your eye to just kind of go through those lists of names. So you can search. So like we have the Wilson family. Oh, Wilson family are members. So current members, Wilson, and then if I search, it'll just jump me down to the Wilsons. And at that point, I could add that person into the list if I wanted to. So Janice and Bill. So William E. Bill there. So, okay. So once I've added my people in, I'm up to 18 now. I would just save that, and then that would be my static subgroup. And then if I needed to make a change, I'd go back into my static subgroup, remove somebody, say Leon is no longer going to participate, click remove, then save, and then that would be my new list. So it is really manual, but it allows you to quickly make a list and then continue from there. The third type of subgroup is going to be a combined subgroup. And with combined subgroups, you'll go to add and you'll go to combined. Then at that point in time, you'll type in your subgroup name. And I'm going to do our members and VBS subgroup here. And then you can add it to your category if you wanted to. But then have a description and start with, when you're starting these subgroups, you do want to start with the largest body of people. So I usually start with active members. Excuse me. Excuse me, thanks for holding there. So I usually start with the largest list of members. So I'll say active members. And then there's going to be the little thing that's kind of like that little Ghostbuster symbol or whatever. You know, it's the no or the stop symbol there. So I'll click on that symbol, and when you click, it rotates to a different symbol. So from no, do not use, to add people to the subgroup above, to remove people from the subgroup above. So, oh, take out the above part. It's literally removing them from this subgroup. So we're going to say we're going to add the VBS people in. VBS, but if we needed to take out a small group of people, we could take those people out. So maybe we had associate members that are part of our active members that we want to take out. We could subtract an associate member subgroup if we wanted to. So, okay, so from that point in time, we would just click save, and it's going to add our active members and our VBS students together. And then at that point, we could count 169 people. I mean, we could do labels or preview them at that point in time. So let me mention the other two tabs here, then we're going to go to break. So import export allows you to import and export a subgroup between computers. So it goes back a really long time, over 20 years at this point in time. And it goes back to a point in time where the software support technicians would create a subgroup and then literally email that file to be imported into the church's computer for that subgroup. So it goes back to a time before we had remote desktop access to be able to connect in and show people or create little videos and send to it. So it goes back quite a ways. Security gives you the option to set up and state who can access your subgroup. So we're on members and VBS right now. We may want to say that, hey, only supervisors and membership can access this subgroup, or one of the other supervisors. We can also say only one of these user IDs and say that, hey, pastor and the secretary can access this, but the admin and Mr. Calloway, Elder Calloway cannot. So there's a couple of different options there as well. So that's security. So why don't we go ahead and go to our 5-minute intermission. I'll bring up the timer here. There we go. And timer, 5 minutes. So we'll start the timer and we'll reconvene here in about 5 minutes. I hope everybody enjoys their intermission. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Let me make sure everybody can hear me here. There we go. Okay, so it looks like the microphone's working. We're good. Okay, I hope everybody had a wonderful intermission. We are going to switch back to Shepherd Staff, and we're going to transition into our reports. And what I'll do is I will save the subgroup reports for the end. I want to make sure we have enough time to cover the big three reports, and then we'll double back to the subgroup reports. Okay, so when it comes to reports, there's a ton of reports inside of Shepherd Staff. And each one of the modules has its own predefined reports. So there's membership reports, attendance reports, contribution reports, and finance reports. And you can even say scheduler reports. There's even the ability to create your own custom reports, which we'll talk about in further webinars. But with this, we're going to start out with, I guess, the basics of reporting. And a good starting point is taking a look at the church directory report. So we'll go to reports here at the top inside of our toolbar. And then we'll go to the church directory report. So I did that kind of quick, but what I'll do is I'll double click typically on the name of the report to pull it up. You can, if you like, you can click on the name of the report and click select, and that'll pull up the report as well. There's also a reports icon here in the toolbar, which allows you to pull up your list of reports, and then you can double click on the name of the report. So there's a couple little options there that allows you to access your reports, and every single module is going to have a list of reports. Excuse me. So you'll notice with most of the reports that there's going to be a reports library here at the top, and it's slightly darker gray, more of a medium gray. And then in the lower part of the window, you're going to have settings and different configurations. Now, with the church directory report, it does have 3 tabs across the middle. So it's possible for reports to have tabs that collect options together. So there might be, 20, 30 options on these reports. And each option kind of gives you a slightly different tweak of the report so that you can get the report that you're looking for. So, and one time they used to tell us, hey, there's 500 plus reports, and those were the report files in the background. And some of the report files can change to give you a different report, but sometimes you need a whole different report file to create the report that you're looking for. So why don't we start here at the top of our window where the report library is. And what the report library allows you to do is create this template for a report, and it's saved here inside of your library of saved reports. So to create a like a template, like a saved report, you'll click on the little piece of paper with the, I kind of call it a starburst there, kind of exploding piece of paper there. So you click on that little piece of paper, and it'll say new report here on the left, and it'll say new report here on the right. And the report that we're going to create is going to be a photo directory. So photo directory, and so I'll call it photo directory. And you can add in a description. So, well, let's say membership photo directory 2018. Member photo directory 2018. I think that's good. So then you can select a font if you have a font that you like. You do want to be careful. Some fonts do work better than others. And you can scale your fonts as well. So you can go a little bit larger or a little bit smaller depending on what you want to do. And I'm going to click save so that the name updates over here. But it does save all the settings that you make down here as well. So as we go through and we change these, I'm going to double back to the save button here in just a few moments to save those changes. So inside your reports, there's going to be some typical little blocks. Like these are very similar amongst a lot of the reports. Format is one of them. A lot of the reports have different formats, and it's kind of like, rotating your report a little bit, pulling a section out, putting a different section in, changing the totals, changing the look and feel of the report. So the church directory report, I've never counted them, but it's probably about 12 different report versions in here. Some of them are going to be ones that have been around for years and years. Some of them are relatively new. They're going to give you the option to group by ministry group or by a person assigned. Give you the option to kind of segment the report by columns. So you can say, hey, I want 3 columns or 2 columns or 1 column. And then option 1 down the page. They do have some that have focus, like could be emails, or there can be some of the older styles that have been around, 15, 20 years. So I'm going to start with the very first one here at the top. That's one that the programmer has added in that gives us the option to use this photo checkbox down here at the bottom. So it gives you the ability to say, hey, I want to include a photo. So household, and it'll include a household photo. All of these reports have a who section, and who is going to be the people that you include. So it could be all people or a subgroup. Of course, the subgroup is going to be the filters that we've been talking about for the past hour or so. But you can also have literal filters to say, hey, I don't want anybody but members, or I don't want non-removed people, or I don't want removed people, so I want people who are not removed on my report. So we have added those filters to a lot of reports. Not all of them have the filter options where you can just check the box, but a lot of them do nowadays. So we're going to say all people, members only, no removed people. We can include certain addresses, so we can say active addresses. We can also say future alternate addresses, or we can include the recent alternate addresses, those that have expired, but it's happened in the last 12 months. So we may still need to, get in contact with those people, see if we can pull them back into the fold. So on the right-hand side, there's going to be include, and basically include is saying, hey, put this information on the report. And you as a user of the software, as an administrator, when you go to create these reports, you're going to be like, yes, I want this. No, I don't want this. And you're going to, mix and match. You're going to go up and down the list and select the items that you want and unselect the items that you don't want. So, and what the programmer has done, you'll notice these little tool tips that show up on the ones that have a little bit more information. So if he includes a tooltip, you can read through the tooltip, and that'll give you additional information about that checkbox. So like professional title is not Mr., Mrs., it's going to be Dr. or Reverend. So, so it's going to be, I guess, kind of like a stature in your life that you've obtained. So I don't think we have any doctors in our database, but I'll check that one. You can say include their preferred name, and so like in our example yesterday, we had a gentleman named William Earl Wilson, and his nickname, he goes by Bill. So when you speak of him, you talk about him as hey, I was talking to Bill. So if you want to use that preferred name over the their formal name, so you can do that, and sometimes that's more helpful depending on the nickname. There's some nicknames that you just wouldn't put on your church directory. It's not that necessarily that they're vulgar, but they're just not, they're just not those nicknames. So, you'll make that call on whether or not you want to do that. Last name, if different. So there are times where you have blended families and you want to include those last names in that household so that you can tell the difference and you can, reference people accordingly. So you can use last names if different. You can do a household reference in those situations as well. So there's different last names. You can point to where those people are by saying see household references. So there's a point of contact there, a point of reference. You can include the birth month and day. It doesn't include the years, and it also hides and keeps ages private as well. Age of children 17 and younger. You can include ministry groups if you're using ministry groups. If you're using a subgroup, it'll allow you to add in a subgroup name. I like the household names in uppercase. It's just easier to read. I wouldn't have felt that way 15, 20 years ago, but it does make it easier to read when it's in uppercase. You can say cell phone number, cell phone personal email for household, no phone email. So there's some situations where, if there's not a household phone number or a household email address, you'll just go ahead and plop in the cell phone and personal email address information for the person there. So if it's not there, just include it. This goes back to, and there might be questions, why would you want to do that? This goes back to when we were transitioning, I guess you'd say as a world, transitioning from people having home phones to cell phones, and there's some options that the programmer added in to kind of try to make that work. At some point, he just got to the point that he just added in other phones and basically saying, hey, include these phone numbers and email addresses on the report. So there was, that in-between time where, we really weren't sure which direction we wanted to go, but we finally got to the point, hey, we're just going to include all that information, and we just have to make sure it's entered into the software correctly. So we're going to include a photo. In most cases, you won't show unlisted phone numbers, but it might be an internal report and you may want to include unlisted phone numbers. So from that point, you will preview the report in most cases. You can just simply print it if you'd like, but in most cases, you'll preview the report and you'll take a look at it. You'll be like, hey, this looks correct, or you'll close it, make some more tweaks, and then preview it again. So it'll show the photos that are inside the database, and you can add household photos and personal photos. If the family doesn't have a photo, then it'll just have a little block there. And it won't have a silhouette, it'll just be a little block there. And then letting you know that the photo wasn't provided. There is a subgroup trait for photos, so you could exclude people who don't have photos in the photo directory if you'd like. But it's basically left to right all the way across the page so that it can include a maximum amount of information. So we have, like with this Abbott family here, Dave, Sue, Lacey, and Jacob, and you'll see they have cell phone numbers, work phone numbers, a work email address. Actually, that's a personal email address, and the W stands for work. And let me make this just a little bit bigger there. So then at that point, you can see personal email address and work email address. So, and then there's the home phone number up here. Actually, let me close this preview and preview that one more time. There we go. Actually, that checkbox for cell personal for household with no phone number, that does include the household email address. So, and I'll make that bigger one more time here. There we go. So then it'll include the household email address as well. So, and it looks like his email address is in 2 places there. So we have to be careful with that. But at that point, you can review the report and then print the report. So you can, export it at that point in time to, a printer or to PDF or Word or whatever you wanted to export it to. So let me close this. At that point, there are other report formats, and a lot of people like the 3-column report because it saves paper. So household 3-column phone below is popular. I'll go ahead and preview that report, and it'll allow you to, include, probably double or triple the number of people on the report. So it saves you quite a bit of paper at that point in time. So, and basically it breaks it left to right into these 3 columns. And, there'll be some spacing between the family names. If the people are married, it will show them on the same line, and they do have to be in the same household, be marked as head of household and spouse accordingly, and they have to be married on the same day. And lots of times people will call and they'll say, hey, these 2 people are married, but they're not showing on the church directory as married. And it turns out that there was a typo on the wedding date. So, you just want to make sure that that information is correct. Okay. So let me see here. Household person assigned. So household by person assigned. Let me show that report. So the report does give you the ability to group by person assigned or by ministry group. And you'll notice when I group by person assigned, over here on the left-hand side, the little group by tree appears. And when you're grouping, it always shows the people who don't meet the criteria first at the top. So these are going to be all of our people who have no person assigned. And then say I wanted to find the people for James Henry, I can click on James Henry, and these are all of the people assigned to James Henry. And it'll say his title or his name here at the top. Then it'll show each one of those households. So, this is another way of kind of creating multiple reports. They could be printed out. It does page break on each one of the elders and allows you to be able to hand this information out to the appropriate elder, and this could be a contact report for them. It would have the phone numbers, cell phone numbers, email addresses, their mailing address if you wanted to send them a card or a letter. So all that information would be present. Plus there's pictures of those individuals, so you'd be able to see who they are, in case you saw them in church, and you could talk to them. So, okay, so I'm going to close that report. Let me go back to household here at the top, and you may have noticed that some of the tabs will appear or disappear when you're selecting the different columns. So the tabs are tied, selecting the different formats, you may see different tabs here at the top. So the tabs are controlled by the format. The symbols tab allows you to apply different symbols to the report. So lots of times people will put an asterisk by the non-members. Then if you are including non-members on your report preview, then it'll have a little asterisk by their name. So let me scroll down. Oh, actually I skipped one step there. Sorry about that. Go back to symbols. I have it set to do not print symbols. So it has to be on one of these options to be able to include the symbols. And then we see the Clark family here, and they have the little asterisk by their name. And that asterisk, there we go, 150. That asterisk just lets you know that those people are not members. Now, there's more than one type of symbol. And so you'll have membership symbols, you'll have membership codes, participation symbols for a member, and participation symbols for non-members. So if you want, to put a B in for a baptized member, you could say B, and then you could say M for member, and then you could say non-member, and you could put an N in there. So then at that point, you could preview the report, and then BM would be baptized member, then this would be a non-member who's not baptized. So the symbols do appear on the reports, and you could just include those on the reports if you wanted to. Now, the church directory isn't always going to be the church directory that you print out and you give to the whole congregation. Sometimes it's going to be a report that you print out and you give to the elders, and then they follow up with people. So that's the way you can use the church directory. Now you can use symbols on different sections. So this is active. I could put an A here, and then preview the report. And then it would include all three of those symbols, baptized member who's active at that point in time. So, there's definitely some flexibility there. And then the third tab is going to be export households in the into a specific format, and these are used for photo directories. So lots of times what people will do is they'll decide whether or not they want to include primary and or alternate household addresses. So if you want the alternate on your photo directory, you can do that. But then from there, you just click on the export to spreadsheet. Here we go. And once it's in the spreadsheet, to right size your columns, and I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger. There we go. To right size your columns, lots of times people will go in and they'll just drag each one of these columns to the right size. What I like to do is click on this little triangle here at the upper left of your screen. And that's like selecting all at that point in time. But then once I've clicked on that little triangle, I'll double click between A and B there, and then that will right size all of my columns. And then nothing is getting cut off at that point in time. So that's a little shortcut on how to right size all of your columns. But once it's in this format, you can go through and review all the names and make sure that these are the people you want in your photo directory. Then go up to File and go to Save As, and then that will allow you to save this as a file, which you can email over to your photo directory company. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the church directory spreadsheet here. And then that's the church directory report. Now I've made all these changes. I do want to remember to save my changes so that the next time I come into this report, those changes will be there. So I'm going to close this, then reopen the church directory report, and you'll notice all my checkboxes are in the exact same spot. And you can have multiple reports in your saved reports library here. So, okay, so at this point, we've talked about the church directory. Let's go ahead and transition into our next report. Let's talk about the anniversaries report. So the anniversaries report is going to be a report that helps you find significant life events that took place at your church. So with the anniversaries report, when we were working yesterday, we had the Wilson family. So Wilson, then we had Bill, and we had Janice. So if I click on Bill here, that'll open up his record. Bill is going to be the head of household. And if I go to personal family, he's married to Janice, and they got married on 7/7/2008. And the reason why I'm showing this is because when working with people and working with the anniversaries report, one of the big reports is going to be the wedding anniversaries report that we're going to be looking at. So I want to make sure that they are listed as head of household and spouse, that they're both marked as married, and that they're both married on the same date. If that is off, then neither one of them will show up in most cases. So Janice is married to Bill. They live in the same household. So I'll okay that window. Then from there, I can say library of saved reports. I can create a report if I'd like. I can say who I want to consider. It could be current members, which are going to be people who are members who are not removed. I could select a subgroup, and I could do everyone as well. From there, there's going to be what, and with what, I can select which report I want. And it could be, birthdays and weddings. Those are the, the anniversaries that people follow up with the most, but it could be some of the other significant life events as well. So it could be birthdays, baptisms, confirmations, weddings. And there's this one term, and lots of times people ask, well, what is a significant death? Aren't all deaths significant? And I would say, yes, all deaths are significant, but that's what they titled the feature. And significant deaths are going to be a record that is attached to a person. So it's not the person who passed away, it's the survived by. So you're actually pulling the data of the survived by person, and on their record will be a significant death record of the person who passed away. So let me transition over to that just for a second since we're talking about it. So I'm going to move the anniversaries report over here. And with significant deaths, let's say, since we have Bill and Janice here, I can go to the Wilson household here and say show household. And actually, I need to go to the household grid. So go to the household grid and find the Wilson household. And to find the Wilson household, I can type WILS, WILS. Give it just a second there. Here we go. WIL, third time's a charm. WILS, there we go, Wilson. And it will jump down to that name. So for those people who have a lot of households or a lot of people inside your database, you can type a few characters on your keyboard and it will jump down to that name or that household, or it'll get you really close to that name or that household. So we have the Wilsons here. If I click on his name and go to the deaths tab, I can add in a significant death. Also, if you have a household and you mark somebody removed by death, the system will automatically create a significant death record for you as well. So inside of here, I could add in the date. I'm going to use yesterday, and let's say his father, William Wilson Sr. passed away. And then I could put in the relationship, so father, then click OK, and I can add in additional relations. So when those are in the system, let me close that, you can go to the significant deaths anniversary and you can find those people. So, excuse me. Okay, so that's significant deaths. There's First Communion, user-defined 3. I kind of briefly mentioned user-defined 3 in yesterday's training. User-defined 3 is defined by the user, but it's a checkbox and a date. So if there's something that you wanted to record in the system that didn't have its own location, you could, name that as a checkbox. So it could be the first time that somebody attended your church. It could be anything that you wanted to just kind of track that date and check that checkbox. So date received, date widowed wedding date, and removed by death. So we were talking about significant deaths. That's for the survived by. The date removed by death is the person who passed away. So there's a huge difference between the two. One is still with us and one is not. So. Okay, so those are our different anniversaries. We're going to say wedding, and then we can state which month we want to have a wedding or we want to run the report for. And this is June, so let's do June. Then from there, you can click preview, and it will show us those individuals, give us the wedding month and day, give us the address, give us a count, and we could print that report out. So let me close that. There are some include options which allow you to expand on your report or shorten your report up. So depending on which anniversary you have selected, these items on the right may or may not be included. So it really just depends on which format you're using, which anniversary you're using. So for include, there could be, name and full last name format. So your basic first last name format, you're reversing it. Date and years, spouse last name if different. You can exclude the column headers. So there's some people who don't want the column headers on the report. You can include the subgroup name and heading. You can also include that preferred name if you wanted to. So if he wants to be called Bill, hey, include the preferred name. Now the date and years goes along with the month and day here. So if you want to, include the years, you can definitely include the years and, congratulate them on, 35 years of marriage or how many ever years it is. But you can include the years if you like. You can also say spouse name when no record is present. So earlier I was kind of harping on and saying, hey, make sure to include the include the spouse in the system, make sure they're head of household and spouse respectively for their household sequence, make sure that they're married on the same date, make sure that they're marked as married. But, hey, if only one person's in the system because you only put members in your database, you could type in his name and then say spouse name when no record is present, and then that will include that spouse name there. Now, that doesn't apply to the church directory. So the church directory still would not show them as married because the other person isn't in the database, but this would allow you to see both spouses in that situation. And then if you're doing labels, you can include a barcode. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this report one more time. And when you preview it, it'll show us those names. Let's zoom in a little bit. And then we can review it. There are sort options where you can sort by the order that you want. But this would be your wedding anniversaries for the month of June. So let me go ahead and close that. There are different when options. So you could say 1 month. You could also say a date range. So if you wanted, over a 2 or 3 year period, you could do that. You could also say month year range as well. And this allows you to really kind of cherry pick your dates here at this point in time. So you could say a certain month, and then that could be a certain month during a certain year time frame, and then as of a certain date. So most people will just say one single month, but depending on what you're looking for, you may be able to narrow it down a little bit further. So when you select certain anniversaries, there's also the option for a calendar. And this allows you to just say, hey, these anniversaries are going to happen on these certain days of the month. And you'll be able to, print this calendar out and post it if you would like. And then people would be able to see those upcoming anniversaries. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the preview there. And it does have labels, and it does have the ability to copy the names, like if you want to copy it into a bulletin. So I click OK. Then at that point, to copy the data to another program, click the clipboard button. So click clipboard. So now it's on the clipboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up Word here. And now that I'm in Word, we'll give it a few more seconds. There we go. So blank document. Then from there, I can right click and paste, and it'll just paste that into my Word document, but it would apply to any document, because the information is on the clipboard. You could go in and make slight tweaks to it, but you could paste that information without having to type it all in. So I just have 3, which would be easy to type, but say you had 20. It would take you a lot longer to type it. So the copy and paste could save you quite a bit of time. So I'm going to say don't save these changes. And we'll go back to Shepherd Staff. There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's go to labels. There is a labels button down here, but I want to show the full function of labels at this time. So when it comes to labels, you're going to go here into your reports window, and inside here, one of the first things you'll notice, there's 2 label options. There's mailing labels and there's labels advanced. So labels advanced was the original labels utility. It's been around 25 years or so, or something like that. It doesn't have a preview, but it has the ability to create and craft your own labels from a form or whatever size you want. The mailing labels is a little bit more restrictive, but it's more with the times really, because most people use 5160, so you can quickly select it, preview it, and then print. So we're going to show mailing labels now, but we're going to show the advanced in another webinar. So inside of this window, there's going to be mailing labels. Once again, report 4, that's going to be like your who section. Who do you want to do these labels for? You could say household newsletter and then select the format. So it's probably going to be print at that point in time, but it could be a subgroup of people, and you could say, hey, I want to send a newsletter to active members. And there's a couple other options there as well. Like a list is going to be an activity. So if you wanted to reach out to all the members of your usher board, you could do that. Click OK. You can also print labels for one person or one household as well. So and we're going to say all people, but we're going to go down to the bottom and apply our filters. And we're going to say include members only, exclude removed persons, and we're going to say include a separate label for anyone in the household with an active personal alternate address. This allows you to be able to, send a bulletin or send a label to um, be able to send a label to like that college student who's away, or those snowbirds who went down to Florida for the winter. So it allows you to print out additional alternate addresses, and these are personal alternate addresses here. But let's go back up. You can include a label count if you need to know the count. You can use bulk mail format, which is all caps, no punctuation. Then you can say do not print barcodes, hide delivery point. And what is the delivery point? Your zip code actually is made up of 3 parts. There's 5 digits and everybody knows the 5 digits, but after that there's 4 digits. And then after that there's actually 2 more digits. The 2 digits locates your house or your residency or your church inside that 4-digit section, and that 4-digit section locates the building inside of that 5-digit section. So it's just further drilling down and allows the post office to get your piece of mail closer to the address when they're sorting it. So it saves everybody time and money basically. And you can print each label multiple times if need be. So first page adjustment will shift the labels down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever number you put in there, it'll just shift them down. And then you can include a carrier route. So if you're in a rural area, you can include carrier route and add in a prefix for that. Okay, so on the right-hand side, there's going to be some additional tweaks that you can make. You can state what type of label that you want to use. It could also be you're trying to get a zip code report or a carrier route report. So we're going to use 5160. It's the most popular by far. For content is going to be basically your label name. And with that, you can state whether it's household or person labels and what type of information you want to show on there. So label name 1 are going to be basically your custom labels. Label name 1 and 2 are going to be your custom labels. But the other ones are going to be like last name and then a word like the Smith residence or something along those lines. So we're going to use label name 1 for households. You can say use your alternate address if in effect, so that the snowbirds and those college students receive those addresses. And then you can tell the system to sort, and you can sort by any of these options. So we're going to stay with zip postal code, and we're just going to say the Arial font. Then we'll preview, and then that will allow us to preview our labels. If we're getting a bulk mail rate, we will want to include our barcodes. You'll notice how the Williams or the Wilsons don't have an address. We'll want to use a subgroup that excludes those people with unknown addresses, so we're not peeling off labels and just throwing them away. So basically throwing money out the window. So once we have that there, then we'll insert our sheet of labels into the printer, properly orienting it so it's either up or down so it prints correctly. And then we'll just click on print and we'll send it out to our printer. Now, if this is the first time you're printing labels, you'll probably just want to print out 1 sheet of labels. So go to pages and just print out the first sheet. And once it prints, then hold it up to your labels or put it behind your labels, hold it up to the light and see how closely it aligns. And if it aligns perfectly, go back and print your whole run. If it doesn't, do some adjustments to get everything set up correctly. Okay, so that's printing out labels. If there's any questions about labels, feel free to post those in the question box. There were 2 other reports that I want to show before we transition into our quiz. The first one is our subgroups report. And I was talking earlier about maintaining your subgroups, and you may end up with a long list of subgroups. So we have subgroup name and description. When you preview that list, it's going to give you the name, the description, and the last used. And this can be used to help determine whether or not you want to keep that subgroup or get rid of that subgroup. This information can also be located in the actual grid. So if we're in our subgroups grid, it has the last used, last user created date and revised here as well. So you can literally look at it and be like, hey, you know, I haven't used this one in 3 years. I'm going to delete it, or maybe it's a sign I should go ahead and use it. So, but it does do that. The other form of this report is your name and security rights. So if you're trying to lock down the software further, you can use this report to give you some insight into what type of individuals will be able to access that information. So is it membership supervisors, attendance supervisors, contribution supervisors, restricted users? You know, you can kind of get a picture of that. And if it's all no's, that means everybody who logs into the software can access those subgroups. So, well, that's not 100% true. Let me restate that. Everybody who has access to that module can then access that subgroup. So that's not 100% true either. Third time's a charm. Everybody who has access to subgroups inside that module will be able to access subgroups inside that module, because the modules will have an option to be able to access and manage those subgroups. So, okay, so let me close that. And then there's the subgroup by person report. And this is more to find out, you know, what subgroups individuals fall into. So you could say include dynamic, static, or combined, and then it could be all people, a subgroup of people, or one person. And the benefit of this report is if you find out that, you know, possibility deceased people are showing up on a subgroup, you can say one person, and then you can see all the subgroups that that person is falling into. And usually it's going to be the static subgroups that you need to be concerned about, because dynamic subgroups exclude deceased people automatically. So, and you know, I guess pin a little note when it comes to deceased people, they are excluded automatically. And if you want to show deceased people, you have to create a subgroup that has a line stated that you're going to include people removed by death. Okay, so that's the last piece of information that I had to share. So I'm going to switch back to our PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to go into our quiz. So I'm going to quiz, and we'll to do our quiz. This is our first quiz of this session. So to do our quiz, we're going to use our polling system. So on your screen, the little quiz should show up, and you'll be able to click on the circle for that question. So I'm going to read the question out loud, and you guys can answer the question. And as you're answering, I'll get a little tally, and then we'll be able to say, okay, well, we did pretty good, or you know, I might need to reiterate a few things. So first question is going to be multiple choice. And which subgroup type would you use to get a list of everyone in your congregation between the ages of 18 and 24? So A, dynamic, B, static, or C, combined? A, B, or C? Okay, and we'll give everybody, oh, that's everybody, perfect. So I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So in looking at this, close the poll, share the results, and okay, there it goes, perfect. So we had 92% say dynamic and 8% say combined. So we'll hide the results and we will share the answer. So the answer is A. A dynamic subgroup would be appropriate in this situation since you are looking for people who fit a certain criteria, all people between the ages of 18 and 24. Next question. So I'll launch the next poll. Question number 2, true or false? Static subgroups update automatically when new information is entered or older records are updated inside the database. True or false? Okay, I'll give it a few more moments there. Okay, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we had 83% say false and 73% say true. So I'm going to hide the poll and share the answer. The answer is false. Static subgroups are a list of names set as of a fixed point in time. Usually the day of the subgroup is created. So in most cases, it's just going to be the date that is created, but you can create subgroups based on time. So if you need a subgroup that changes over time, create a dynamic subgroup. Question number 3. Okay, is going to be multiple choice, A, B, or C. Multiple choice, every time you open a certain report in Shepherd Staff, the dates are off and there are options selected you don't need. What should you do? A, delete the saved report in the reports library. B, make changes to the saved report in the reports library and click Save. Or C, either A or B. So we have 3 choices there. Okay, and I'll give everybody a few more seconds here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we had a 58-42 split. We had 42% say B, and we had 58% say A or B. So I'll hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is C, which means that it could be A or B, but you can do both. Depending on your preference, you will either delete the report in the reports library or update the report in the reports library and save your changes. So in some cases, you're like, hey, I don't need that report at all, I'm deleting it. Or sometimes you're like, hey, I still want to use that report, I just want the dates to be correct, so I'm gonna, make changes to it and then save it. So, okay, so question number 4. Is it gonna be true or false? The church directory report has the ability to print a photo directory with contact information. So church directory report, true or false? Okay, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the answer. Share the result. We were unanimous in our choice here. We said 100% said true. So I'll hide the results and share the answer. The answer is true. You can print a photo directory by using the church directory report. There are options to include all cell phone numbers, work email addresses, and alternate addresses as well. So our 5th and final quiz question pertains to the anniversaries report. True or false? The anniversaries report can only be used to print birthdays and wedding anniversaries. True or false? Well, good job, everyone. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. We were unanimous back-to-back times here. So we're saying false. So I'll hide the results and share the answer. And of course, the answer is false. Users can use the anniversaries report to find many different types of significant life events. This is not just limited to birthdays and wedding anniversaries. This report will find baptisms, confirmations, date received, and more. Wonderful. Okay, Do you have any questions? If you do, please post those in the question box. I'd love to hear from you. If not, and you're dropping off, I do want to thank you so much for attending today's Shepherd Staff webinar. We truly hope that you enjoyed today's training session. And of course, outside of the question and answer session, if you have any questions, give us a call at 1-800-346-6120. If you're an email person, feel free to shoot us an email at support@cts.cph.org. Thank you, Laura Lynn. I'll double check to make sure that you get a copy of the PowerPoint sent to you. Thank you so much. Okay, well, people are beginning to drop off rapidly here. So if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and end the webinar, and we'll see everybody tomorrow. Okay, for James Bowman, this is Rod Kiles. We are signing off.